Hey man,
How's it, Dave? Good and you, man?
good. I'm
How's
seeing our
it going?
backgrounds,
What's
man.
happening?
Good, good. How's it, Dave?
What's up, Dan? Dan, how you doing, man? Dan, did you get
Ah,
a haircut?
I was hoping you wouldn't notice, but yeah,
I know. I told him to take his hats off and he refuses.
not happening. Like this weekend was the worst for me. Like my barber's out of town. I try out a new barber, and like he did nonsense, man. So the Springboks did nonsense. So
It's
Yeah.
good.
yeah,
We can just keep you full screen so everyone can notice.
Yeah.
put me back there.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man. Yeah, it's good, eh, Dan? You show your hair
No,
later.
no, not a chance, man. Not happening.
Dave, did you watch the Boca? I
Andrew,
should have
Dan.
messaged you. I forgot. Damn it. I sent you a message.
As always, David did not watch the rugby. This is not surprising.
I know. Well, we won anyway. We beat Argentina. We still lost the championship. That was sucked, but at least we beat Argentina. That's fine. It will do. But if you have just joined us, ladies and gents, I can see Yako's just joined us. How's it, Yako? This is the coffee chat with Dave, Daniel, and myself, Andrew. It's all about property. If you have any property questions for us, let us know. What we'll be doing on this call is running you through the events that are happening this week and next. It's fairly quiet for the next 2 weeks, as well as bringing on Bruno Samau to talk about a very creative way in terms of how you can finance solar through tax. So Bruno's going to talk about how you can finance solar, and then we all know interest rates did go up last week. So we do want to bring Miguel up to talk about interest rates and how we're all going to be affected by interest rates moving forward into 2023. So please, if you have any questions for Bruno, Miguel, Dave, myself, Dan, put in the comments box. At the same time, can you all tag a friend in? If you know of anyone that wants to invest in property, maybe interested in the interest rate hikes, interested in solar panels, energy, green, all that, tag them in now. That'll be amazing. But otherwise, Dave, I think this week's fairly quiet. I know there's the mastermind happening tomorrow.
Yeah, Mastermind happen tomorrow, and that's all that I know of. That's happening in the near future. So we got that to do, and some good stuff coming up in the future, hopefully.
Yeah, so I was speaking to Simone earlier about it, and as you know, we do want to arrange a roadshow at the end of the year. So we're having a conversation about what the stuff you're doing in Cape Town, Dave, with the Cashney and John. I heard your breakfast last time was pretty good, eh? Was it full?
Yeah, we completely oversubscribed. Way too many
Awesome.
people try to book too late, which is always a fun experience. Yeah,
Always.
Cape Town breakfast was absolute smash. We had lots of fun, lots of good chats. Ready to book the next one in. So
Awesome.
looking forward to it, man.
Yeah. And so, Dave, we had a breakfast show in Joburg a few weeks ago as well. I think that's the way to go, eh? And I know Ross and Andrews want to do a breakfast in the West Strand now, and I'm keen to do one in the East Strand. I messaged Jade in PE saying, can Jade do a breakfast in PE? So as soon as we get all the information, everyone, we'll send it to you all across the country about our Sept and breakfast and all the network events happening. But like Dave said, the next 2 weeks is quiet. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night, is the mastermind for the professional members. Yako will be on there. How's it, Clifford? So if you are a professional member, make sure you do join us. If you're wondering how they work, we do breakaway rooms. So there's a breakaway room for Daniel and the youth. There's a breakaway room for people that have never bought an investment property. And there's a breakaway room for the more advanced investors. The conversations are different. So that starts at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Please make sure if you are a professional member that you do join. And Dave, who else is with us at the moment, eh?
No, I've got a couple of the regulars in. Yaku's joining us. Clifford's on. Chuma's joining us from YouTube. Don't think we've seen Chuma before. And Andre's on. So a couple of the regulars, a couple of new faces. It's always good to see. Yeah, guys, like Andrew said, if you got any questions, anything you want to ask us, we will bring on Bruno and Miguel in a couple of minutes and we can get started over there. But make sure you send through those questions ahead of time so we can make sure we get them answered.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good. And as I said, with regards to all the events coming up in the middle of October, the Durban trip and the Bloom trip, all that, we're just busy working all the information, logistics, venues. We'll let you all know. Otherwise, let us quickly know, what are you all up to? Yaku, what are you busy investing in? Clifford, how's your multi-lets? What are you doing, Clifford, out there? Let us know. And Chuma, good to see you again.
And he says, Daniel, take off the cap. I'm taking nothing off, Kuma. Nothing.
Just stick it off. But yeah, I think what we should then do, Dave, is why don't we bring on Bruno, And let's get Bruno to introduce himself, and Bruno can tell us who he is, where he's from, and then we'll start getting into the how we can fund solar. So Bruno, welcome.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Drew, and thanks, Dave. It's always good. It's always good to be with you guys. Yeah, and I mean, it's such an interesting conversation. It's such a and Daniel. Sorry, it's.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's always such an interesting conversation to have. But I think for the sake of insight, or at least introduction, I work. So I'm an attorney by profession. I've been in the property space for a number of years now, and my primary focus is on the strategic side of things. So I've got a litigation department that helps us enforce things. I've got conveyancing, but ideally what I like to see is ideas, creativity, and taking property investors from where they are to where they could be. And that's why we're always discussing like new ideas, new ways of approaching things. And this just happens to be one of them. And I think it's a marvelous way of getting some savings.
Okay. Interesting, man. And I mean, Bruno, you were talking Money Summit, weren't you, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
with Mohammed Wadi. What were you speaking about at that summit?
So, so the summit with Mohammed, and also touched on the conversation that we started having last week. Just better ways for property investors to start thinking about investments. And the one thing I took from the Money Summit, which I really loved, and I even posted about it, is that it applies all around to all types of investments. It's not just property, like getting your structuring right, making sure that you've got the protection, making sure that you understand from an accounting, from a tax perspective, from a legal perspective. It doesn't matter whether it's property, it doesn't matter whether it's shares, it doesn't matter whether it's retirement annuities. You just need to make sure that you've got everything down to a T, that you understand why you have it, whether it's good for you, and that you actually implement it.
Definitely. But can you explain how it works, or is it too complicated to explain?
No. So we can go. It's a nice. So the nice introduction to this is most people know that. Most people know that when I approach these conversations, I always speak about these three dominant principles, right? And I know that people are probably tired of hearing them, but the problem is, in spite of that, as I keep going through these talks, I realize how important it is to emphasize the fact that you have to have asset protection, you have to have tax efficiency, you have to have financing optimization. And that's the truth behind it. If you don't have those things, your property deals are going to struggle. Now, if we start looking at it in a bit more detail, the reality is you don't want to get involved in a deal. And this is the conversation that Mohammed and I were having at the Money Summit. You don't want to get involved in a deal just because you've got a tax benefit and a tax saving. The deal itself needs to make sense. So the tax efficiencies shouldn't dictate whether you get into a deal or not. Same with financing. The fact that you're able to get a loan doesn't mean that you should be getting a loan. You have to look at the numbers, make sure that the deal makes sense, irrespective of the type of financing. And this is where Miguel's talk is going to come in and be crucial, because he's speaking about interest rates going up, and he's speaking about things that might happen after that. Now, as a property investor, you need to factor these things in. If your deal doesn't make sense, if your deal only made sense in 2020 when the interest rates were low, there's going to be a surprise. Now, tax efficiency, completely the same thing. We often discuss like a bunch of incentives that SARS brings to us in order to incentivize, whether it's investing in a city or refurbishing like old rundown flats, or in this specific instance, we know we have a power issue, a power problem. So SARS, the Treasury has come out with ideas to say, you know what, if people could be slightly more self-sustainable, what could we give back in order to incentivize that? And that's where these type of incentives kind of kick in. So we've always spoken about with property investors things like Section 13(6), which is buildings in certain new developments, new builds. We've always spoken about Section 13 Quat, which is buildings in the inner city. So today's conversation is around Section 12B. Right, so it's another section in the Income Tax Act. It's not something that anyone necessarily needs to go and study, but you need to know of its existence, because when you need that advice, then you can start exploring and seeing what it actually means. So what SARS is basically Treasury trying to tell us now is we do have a power crisis. I read an article in preparation for the talk last week and the week before about how bad the power crisis could actually be. Now, I'm not an expert when it comes to that, so I'm not speaking at all from how much power we have left, where we're going to get it from, decommissioning of stations, that power supply. I can't speak on that. What I do know is, according to this, there's a certain amount of decommissioning that has to take place by a certain period of time, and no one really knows yet whether there's enough backup or a side plan that's going to cater for this decrease in the power supply. So we now start looking at things like this, say, if we take this into our own hands, what does it look like? So 12B basically says that if you buy solar installation, buy and install a solar installation in a specific property, well, I mean, it doesn't have to be in a specific property. There's a bunch of things 12B says, but specifically for property investors. If you went out and you got a solar installation on your property, you could actually claim a tax deduction from SARS. So it's quite as simple as that. So who wouldn't want to save in the payment of tax? So that's already a fantastic way. That's really fantastic. If you take anything out of this, just remember that. But now let's go into it a bit deeper. So why it has to be property investment as opposed to just doing it for your own house is because it has to be within the course of one's trade. So that's the one thing. So it has to be, for example, your multi-lets or your properties where you've got tenants on that you're drawing income. The other reason for this as well is, remember, this is a tax deduction against your taxable income. So you take your profits as an example, and when you calculate how much you need to pay SARS, you're going to deduct the costs of the solar installation. So it's intuitive that it actually has to be like an income generating exercise, right? Now, how much you can claim back from SARS depends on the size of the installation itself. And again, I'm not an expert when it comes to this, but if the generation power is under 1 megawatt, right, then you can actually claim 100% deduction in year one. If it's over 1 megawatt, you can claim 50%, 30%, and 20%, right? So over 3 years, you can claim the total cost of the installation. So why? So what does this mean? Like, why did they do this? My understanding of the logic behind it is anything under 1 megawatt is actually cleaner. It's less. Yeah, I don't know how to actually explain. It's actually a cleaner, more sustainable way of producing electricity, and it's and the projects aren't as big, so they're actually incentivizing those slightly smaller projects. Now, what makes up 1 megawatt? I can't speak from experience. My understanding of it, and I may be completely wrong, but your small installations and your multi-lets and some small buildings and stuff like that are perfectly fine. You can probably get that 100% deduction. It's your bigger ones. I think anything over 5,000 solar panels, if I'm not mistaken, is probably where you're starting to reach your 1 megawatt like mark. And if I understand correctly, that's about the size of a soccer field. So unless your property is that big and you're putting up that much energy, you're probably going to fall within the 100% deduction the next year. So what effectively this means for a property investor is, let's say I pay 300,000 Rand for a solar installation. Now, that 300,000 Rand is deductible, but that doesn't mean I get the 300,000 Rand back. Remember, SARS, I can deduct it from my taxable income. So if, for instance, my taxable income is R1 million and I want to deduct this 300,000 that I pay towards solar, it means that my profit is 700,000 Rand. I will now pay SARS the percentage, my tax rate on that 700, not the R1 million. So that's how it works. So in effect, when you're buying this, you're getting, let's call it a discount of your tax rate. So if you're a company, for example, and you pay 27% tax, you would effectively get almost an immediate discount of 27% on the cost of the solar installation. And yeah, quite literally, it's as easy as that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bruno. I did attend the two events you alluded to, being the Money Summit with Muhammad Gadi, where he spoke on his view on his investments, what makes a good deal, and where you should be doing a deal, not because of the type of financing you're getting or tax implications. And I also attended the business partner event, where you did go into details about getting deductions on your tax because you're installing solar panels or what have you. For the viewers listening right now, if there is someone that would go about getting the deduction from like a practicality side of things, can they go along and do it? Can Intergen and their office do it? And just remind me, what section did you say it was? Section 12?
12B of the Income
12B.
Tax Act. Yeah.
Yeah. And is it something that the team at Intergen, Shilly Boy and Lisa could
absolutely
with as well? Huh?
No, absolutely. Look, so it's not, I think SARS will obviously always ask questions when you're trying to get some benefit out of them. So as soon as you do this installation, I know that SARS, for example, pokes holes on whether this is the first time that the system's been used. Because what people were trying to do is they were trying to use the same system, but move it across into different places and claim this deduction multiple times. So SARS is always going to ask a question. So the reality behind it is, should it be a simple process? It should be, because you've got your invoices. There's different ways of calculating what your deduction is. So as long as somebody within your office has that financial know-how, they can do it. But obviously, sometimes it takes a little bit more effort. So you probably want to approach people that are used to doing it and have that sort of, relationship and understanding on what it actually takes to get this deduction.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. I definitely agree. And it does spark interesting conversations. But while we're on that, Andrew, Bruno did mention reviewing your interest rates and not getting deals because it works in 2022. And that's why I'm super excited to get Miguel on and have a discussion around interest rates. Like, how do you look at investments and factor in that increase? What are some of the golden nuggets for the listeners as well? Huh?
Yeah, definitely, man. I think, Bruno, it's important that if anyone is interested in what you've spoken about, we popped your Bruno Samar link in there. We'll pop Intergen in there as well. And they can have a word with Shilly Boy as well. By the way, happy birthday, Shilly Boy. It's Shilly Boy's birthday today. So a massive shout out to Shilly Boy Matiba from Intergen. Hopefully he's listening.
Yeah, hopefully. I'll make sure to mention it to him.
Okay, cool, nice one. But I think, Bruno, that's awesome, man. I think it leads nicely into interest rates with Miguel Martin. So, Bruno, thank you so much for your time, man.
Awesome. No, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure. And sorry for not having greeted you, Daniel.
It's okay.
Cool. But now I'll say thank you specifically to Daniel. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. I hope you all see it. And he didn't mention the hat, so that's a good bonus.
Enough people already mentioned the hat. I thought I'd just leave you alone today.
All right, cool. Thanks, Bruno.
Cool. Thanks.
Hectic. Cool, man. Thanks, Bruno. So who else is with us? There's Miguel Martins. How's it, Miguel?
How's it, guys? How's it going?
Good, and you?
Good. So I've actually spent the last 2 weeks diving deeply into a solar solution for my multi-lets. So I had a debate with a couple of investors a few weeks ago on whether landlords should be looking into this, right? And we're split on whether this is a landlord issue and whether we should be solving for our tenants. And my point of view on this is that although it's not my fault, it still is my problem. If I can create a competitive advantage, for my apartments, because they have that backup. The lights stay on, the Wi-Fi keeps on going. I can't solve for everything, but I can at least keep some things going. I think it's at least going to keep my tenants a bit longer, so I'm going to have less vacancies, and I'm going to be able to possibly call for a higher rental potentially. I still want to test that one. So I haven't invested yet. I'm definitely going to be going off to Intergen and Shilly Boy and Bruno, and hoping to put their advice to the test. and I hope to come back in a month or two's time and tell you whether I got that claim back from SARS.
That's so much value. When you think about it, and the exercises you have and with students, how do you make the tenant's life easier, thereby keeping a good relationship? And you, like Miguel said, you might be able to charge more, but it's about having a good tenant, keeping them, and yeah, it's so much value, I'd say.
Yeah, and Megs, I mean, I'm speaking to people on a weekly basis now. As you know, I've just come back from the UK, and the conversation is the exact same, except there's no real load shedding. But they're talking of load shedding in the UK now. There's talk of it happening, but the energy price is going up. But obviously, in the UK, solar panels won't be that effective. However, I met a few people who do have solar panels. There's more wind turbines and stuff. So it's an interesting topic. And I was asking, I went to a networking event in the UK. I said, guys, what's your solution for the increase in our energy prices here? And no one has got a solution yet. An easy solution.
I think we get used to what we have, right? But the world is changing. The world is shifting. You know, whether it's Eskom who can't supply to the demand that is there, and today they're talking about bringing in new supply, but the demand is not going to pull back. The demand is going to keep on growing. You know, economic and population growth, right?
Yeah, of course.
And the US definitely a problem there. Same thing. They have similar challenges to us. They might be sometime behind us. They may be able to manage it better. But the thing is, you can only have so many nuclear and other power stations. It's not an unending source, but the demand keeps on growing, right?
Exactly.
And of course, in UK and in Europe, you know, with Russia closing off pipelines, their energy issues there, the cost of energy is going up because their supply has been throttled, you know, by Russia. So they've got slightly different problems, but it all comes down to being a bit more self-efficient. But so very, very interesting, very topical, and becoming very real.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
The other thing becoming very real is interest rates.
Yeah, so talk to us, Mix, because you spoke last week, didn't you, at the Business Partners event, and yourself as an investor going to be getting affected as well. I think you've got a slide, don't you, that you want to try share?
Let me pop it up. It just makes things a bit easier to talk to. Okay, so
cool.
Can you see that?
Bring it up.
Yeah.
Let me know when it's up.
It's good.
Cool.
Okay. Cool. Look, so I'm going to kind of go through exactly this. So this top graph really talks to interest rates, right? Prime rates been since 2002. And we see here 2002, the increase to 7%. That was the IT bubble at that point. 2008, the financial crisis went up to 15.5%. And every time we come lower, you know, from 17 down to just over 10, from 15%, you know, in mid 20 teens, we've kind of been hovering at around the 10% mark pre-COVID. And then, of course, dropped right down to 7% prime. And that was really the government trying to stimulate the economy after the shutdowns. And businesses by making money cheaper and you know, makes the economy. So what we now is this massive resurge right back up to 9.75. Last week the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, the Reserve Bank announced that they did another 0.75% increase, which took us to 0.75. And really what they are chasing is this graph over here on the bottom left. So our Reserve Bank is charged with keeping inflation between 3 and 6%. The inflation number that came in for August was 7.6%, slightly off the high in July of 7.8. So there's somewhat coming down or easing off, let's call it that, but still quite high, right? Definitely above the 6%. And we will continue to see interest rates increase. Or at least interest rates won't come down, let's say that, until this inflation number goes below 6%, until it starts heading towards the mid-tier of about 4.5%, you know, midway between 3 and 6%. So the question of when it will come down, well, it's going to follow inflation. So keep an eye on inflation, and you'll start to see where you'll start to kind of forecast when interest rates will come down. What's driving inflation? There's a multitude of things: the oil price, the cost of food, the cost of goods, etc., etc. So that is all driving inflation. If you're going to have a nice economic discussion, some of it's internally driven from South Africa, some of it's externally driven from South Africa, just like the oil prices. So it's not all within our control, but this is what drives our interest rates. But so that's where we were as at last week, Thursday afternoon. But the question right now is, so where is it going, and when's it going to stop increasing? Are we going to go back to this 15% of 2008 or even higher at 2002? Where is it going to go? And I came across, if you can see the next slide, I came across this very interesting piece of research. And it was an international company, and they went to 17 South African industry leaders and economists. And the question was, where do they see the peak in the cycle, this interest rate cycle? Where do we see the peak? So this was at the end of August, early September actually, and 11% of those 17 economists initially said, well, September will be the end of it, right? 33% said that November will be the end. Remember, there's another MPC in November and then another one in March. So that's really where 66%, 2/3 of those economists feel that interest rates the increase in interest rates should come to a peak either in November or March. Although some do think that it will carry on into later next year, right? So what's important about who these economists are, and here I've just included an example of who they are. So when you ask the likes of the banks and Wits and Gibbs, you're getting some good, economic-led answers. I think when we ask our real estate brands and the guys who are interested in actually that the market keeps on driving, I think you get a very positive outlook. So possibly these 11% were Jarvitz and Better Bond, who were really hoping that interest rates stop growing as soon as possible. But really what we can see is that the cycle may end in November or March. Just a last slide. So if we go to the banks, and this was before the Thursday announcement, and because that announcement and because of the statement that follows or that precedes that announcement from the Reserve Bank, these views might change. I need to look that up. But at the moment, FNB and Investec thought that in November we would still see a 0.5% increase. APSA sitting on another 75 basis points increase. So that'll take us to 10.5% prime. And then if we do see another increase in March, I think the banks are agreeing that we should probably see a softening of increases, maybe by 0.5%, which takes us to 11% prime. So we're not far off from where we were just before COVID, right? At about 10%. But what has changed is that in that time, the majority of landlords were not able to increase their rentals, but the costs went up. Utilities, maintenance costs, rates and taxes all went up, right? So your income was flat, your costs were increasing, and now your biggest cost is coming right back to where it was. So where we find ourselves now with landlords is that the profit or the net margin we may have been making on our rental portfolios are squeezed compared to where they were just before COVID 2 years ago. So, but really hoping that this outlook is fair, hoping that 11% is the top end of the cycle, and just hoping that there are no more shocks in the market, just like we had with the war in Ukraine, that sent a whole new set of drivers into the markets. I'll stop there, Andrew. Thanks.
Yeah, Miguel. That is very interesting, eh? And like you said, we're basically back to where we were a couple of years ago. And it's kind of, I remember through COVID, Miguel and Dave, I think I was speaking to you, and you mentioned a friend or someone that you knew was buying a 4 million rand property, and they could just afford it at 7%, like just afford it. Remember that?
Yep.
And if that goes to 12%, I mean, I doubt they'll afford that property now. Eh?
So that's where I know
Yeah.
a lot of stress is going to come. But I think for our audience, one of the important questions, and it's a conversation I got into last week on one of the WhatsApp groups, of this interest rates are so high. How do we find deals that work? So for one, I think Miguel's you pointed out that where we are at the moment isn't incredibly high. We're pretty much back onto what a lot of us consider normal baseline. So we're not too high. And at the end of the day, I think this is always a matter of stress testing and just running your numbers. Do deals where the numbers work and do deals where the numbers stack up. It hasn't changed. Just the cost, like you said, Nicole, the base costs have changed. That's all. So our variables have changed, but the methodologies we use as investors haven't. Nothing's changed over there.
And Dave, I think all one can do now, no matter where they were, if they did buy at 7% on break even, do your numbers. As an investor, we've got to do the numbers. We've got to know what's coming up, right? And you also want to stress your calculations on your portfolio, so that if you add the extra 1, 2, 3%, if we do if we do go higher than 11%, what does that mean for you? Are you going to be able to hold out for some time? For how long? And then if you have to, what are the dramatic decisions you need to make to be able to get through it? What you don't want to do as an investor is you do not want to miss your home loans payments. That memory does not get lost anytime soon. And even if you are able to sell your property, but you've missed a couple payments, yes, you'll be able to pay the bank, but they'll remember that you've missed your payments, and that'll sit with credit bureau, etc. And you will not be able to get back into the market very easily for the next year or two, until that moves on. So that, I think, is the real risk. The losing a property now, well, if you were able to make the payments and the property wasn't profitable, was it a good investment to begin with? Rather take the hit and move on.
100%. And just do what you can to avoid non-payment. And if you do need to go through the process of selling, get ahead of the curve and do it before, like you said, Miguel, before you start missing payments, because that is something you don't want to go back from.
100%.
Exactly. I know Dan's got a question for you, Miguel, but just very quickly to everyone, this is Miguel Martins, a full-time property investor, formerly worked at Absa Bank. If you have any questions for Miguel around interest rates, what's Miguel doing with these multi-lets, please ask the question now. We've got another 10 minutes or so, so please ask questions. And just a reminder for all the professional members, our mastermind session is tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. So if you are a pro member, remember, we do have breakout rooms. So there's a breakout room for the youth with Daniel. There's a breakout room for beginners who've never bought a property. And there's a breakout room for more experienced investors for all our professional members. If you do want to get in contact, if you're interested in joining, Dave will pop an email address in there for you. Just click it and get in contact. But Dan, what was your question for Miguel?
Yeah, awesome. Miguel, while talking about safeguarding your portfolio and exploring ways to ensure that you do not go under, what's your opinion on some investors wanting to make their interest rates fixed? Obviously, you did mention that there were a couple of increases expected around March. That those are projections, but what if someone had to make their interest rates fixed? What are some of the advantages of doing that, and maybe one or two disadvantages if you can think about for people that want to make fixed interest rates? I see Eric actually is asking the same question, huh?
Yeah, no, Daniel, and that's such a popular question at the moment, right? So what happens when someone fixes their interest rates, right, is the bank needs to go and effectively fix their funding on the back end for those home loans, right? And they go into the market. They literally go into the money market and they obtain those funds at a particular rate for that amount of time. You might want to fix it for a year. I know Absa fixes it up to 5 years. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, right? But now you go to invest and you say, I want to buy money in the market for 5 years. And the investor's going to say, well, okay, this is my view on interest rates. And by the way, the investor, the money investor on that side, also wants to make a margin on their side, right? And they've got a particular view on interest rates. So by default, by fixing your rate, you're going to be paying a higher rate than what you are paying now. Possibly on a 5-year fixed rate, anything around 2.5%, possibly more. So it depends on the bank. It depends on a few factors. So now you take today's rate, you add on 2.5%, and you're stuck there for 5 years. Rates go up and rates go down. You saw the 2002 and 2008 graphs, right? You don't stay at the top for very long. Maybe 6 months, and then you start coming down. With a fixed rate, you are there. You stay there for that period. So usually, to get out of fixed rates, you have to pay a penalty, which is effectively the interest that has to be paid back to that money investor where the bank went off into the market to go and fetch funding for that rate, right? So now you've got to pay that back. So once you're in it, and to get out of it, you've got to pay some more. My advice or my thoughts on this would not be to get a fixed rate. If you wanted to do a fixed rate, you should have done it when rates were at 7%. And then you would have fixed rate at your rate plus 1. Then you'd be in the money. And that's something we should have all done at that point in time, right? Of course, no one wants to, when things are low and things are good, no one wants to increase their rates, right? But that was actually the right time to do it. What one should do now is, if you're willing to buy money at today's, at your whatever your rate is plus 2%, then find out what that number is. Start paying that home loan rate today. Okay, put the extra cash into your home loan, and then as rates increase, you've already got extra cash to access should you need to, right? But as soon as rates decrease, you can then obviously stop paying those higher rates. So fund yourself a fixed rate is my thoughts, and that's just generally being a good kind of counsel that I've heard over my life at Absa Home Loans. So fund your own fixed rate is maybe the short answer to your question, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope Absa is listening. So Miguel could not give us that advice a couple of years ago, and now that he's a property investor in the gutters like we are.
Actually, this is advice that we give freely in terms of fixed rates. Yeah, because when people think that once they get in, they can get out. And they think that the bank is penalizing them. No, they've actually bought a very different instrument. So this is not commonly known, but definitely freely offered.
Also,
go ahead. Sorry.
No. So please finish.
I've got an interesting tip for people with multi-lets and renting out houses, and it's something that I'm actually getting installed today. So at 2 of my multi-lets, the most expensive thing about load shedding is the gate batteries that I have to replace almost after every bout of load shedding. So what happens is that gate battery inside your motor, it gets run down. It doesn't get the opportunity to recharge, and then over time and over the bouts of load shedding, you're replacing that gate motor, that gate battery. It's like 400 battery, 300 battery plus the electrician to come out and do it, right? So I'm actually getting a double battery installed on top of that battery. So I've effectively now got 3 batteries that run that gate motor. It's installed by an electrician just to make sure that nothing that nothing pops in that gate motor and it's done correctly. And I've effectively got three batteries as standby for that gate motor, so that when with multi-let, the gate motor opening up and closing several times a day, doesn't run it down as much. It's able to hold its charge, and it will save me batteries over the long term. So it's something I've been running at one of my multi-lets for the last 3 years, and it's been running quite successfully. I haven't had to change batteries at that multi-let for the last 3 years. With other ones, changes quite often. I see Dave nodding his head, he understands it. So these are small things that we do. They solve 2 problems. They save me cost because of the batteries that I'm charging, and they actually give my tenants a better experience because they know that gate is secure. It closes when it's supposed to, and you don't have to put it on manual overnight when that gate battery is flat. So just a little tip that I thought I'd share with everyone here, since we're talking solar and that kind of thing.
Awesome, thanks, Miguel. That's great. So Dan, when you're running your numbers now, multi-lets, what interest rates are you using?
Yeah, so I'm using at least 11-12%. So worst case scenario, what do the numbers look like? But Migs, like when you're looking to buy properties from like this point onwards and looking to stress test your deals, what's an interest rate you are currently using? And yeah, Davis.
So 2 comments. I'm using 14 because I don't think it was. If I look at the last two crises, we hit the kind of 14%. So I'm happy. I'm hoping that it's only 11%, as the economists are saying, but the economists are often wrong. So I'm banking in 14, and I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I'm planning for it.
Jeez, if you're not knocking, you'll try at this point, huh?
But Dan, it's one of those things that's always, and Drew and I've always spoken quite heavily about it, is stress testing your deals. And at what point, and that's one of my calculations, is at what point during prime lending will this property no longer cash flow? So how high does the interest rate need to get for that to start negatively cash flowing? Now, it's a bit of a complicated math thing, but at the end of the day, it does help me look at it and say, look, this thing's only got 2-3 points above prime. Do I think prime is going to go up? I think give me 4 years ago, I was quite comfortable tasting at 12%. And I think if you look at it now, I'm I'd probably be around Miguel as well. If a deal doesn't cash flow at 13% or above, then I'm going to start looking at it. And I don't mean cash flow healthily. Like, it doesn't have to knock the lights out at 14%, but it has to wash its own face. It has to be able to survive. So that's good.
Awesome.
So here's another thought. The best time to buy a property, and this is what I'm trying to also get across to the banks, or the ones that will listen. The best time to buy property is when interest rates are the highest, because what happens is that your affordability can only improve after that, right? If you're buying at 12, 13, 14%, you know it's only going to be there for the next 6 months, 8 months. And if you can hold on to that, interest rates have to go back, have to normalize back at probably the 11 maybe 10%. And that's where your margins open up nicely. Unfortunately, that's where there's blood in the streets, right? And everyone's like going on about interest rates, and whoever's getting killed by interest rates is those who bought, a year ago. And that's the voices you're going to hear. Whereas if you can buy at those high interest rates, it will only get better, and you'll probably be in a position to be more negotiable on that purchase price.
Definitely. 100%, Miguel. So, Miguel, I think we come to the end of it. Thank you so much for your time and insights.
My pleasure. No, good to be here, and always good to chat to you guys.
And we'll get you on again in the near future, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thanks so much, guys. All the best, eh?
Awesome, Miguel. Thank you so much. Yes. It was great. Okay. Cheers, Yeah, cool, Dave. So I think it's almost 1:45. Some interesting conversations and questions, which is great. Just a reminder to you all for tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. It's the Professional Mastermind with Dan and Jason taking the lead with the Sept Youth, and myself and Dave and the team taking the other breakout rooms. So if you are a professional member, please make sure you click and you join us. Click the link and join us tomorrow night at 6. And we will let you know all the road trips that are happening in Bloemfontein and Port Elizabeth and Cape Town and Durban later on in the week. We will be coming to your nearest city. Thank you again, Miguel. That is great. And I think, Dave, anything from your side?
No, I think that's it. We got Mastermind tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun one. And everyone just keep an ear out. It's not as bad it's not too bad. We've been worse. So just understand what's happening. Look at the markets, do the math, and try not to be too emotional about it.
Exactly. And just go with the cycle. That's it.
Yeah.
And Dan, from your side?
Like everyone else has said, and it's going to be cool. Can't wait for the road trip. We're literally going to all the major cities in Johannesburg, Victoria, PE, Durban, Cape Town. We're coming out, Dave. Don't blush too much. I saw Dave smiling a bit too much there. But so can't wait for that. Investor of the Year is coming as well, so that's going to be cool.
That's a monster.
Judging is coming, so it's going to be an awesome end to the year, and looking forward to meeting and networking with you all.
Definitely. So we'll be in touch with all the details as we get them, and you all have a good week.
Cool.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, gents.